What's up, guys and girls? This is Midnight Strike 3625 here to introduce a brand new discography review. So we're going to be taking a look at the Disturbed discography over the course of the next 6 weeks to prepare for their new album Immortalized, which is due on August 21st, 2015, exactly 6 weeks from now. So until then, I will be reviewing Disturbed albums weekly, every Friday, with the exception of The Lost Children, which I will review in between the week of Asylum and the week of Immortalized, their brand new album. So, without further ado, I will be introducing this discography review with, of course, their debut album, The Sickness. But before we get into that, let's get into a little bit of backstory and background information as to who this band is and where they came from. So, Disturbed as a band formed in 1994 with a different name and a different lineup. Singer Eric A. Walt and drummer Mike Wengren, sorry if I pronounced some of these names wrong, bassist Steve Kamak, and guitarist was Dan Donegan. Of course, Dan Donegan and Mike Wengren are the two surviving members, I should say, because Eric A. Walt would leave shortly after recording their first demo back when they were named Brawl, and Steve Kamak would leave in 2003-2004 era, but in between Believe and 10,000 Fists. But, like I said, we're going to be starting with The Sickness, and after David Draymond joined the band in 1996, they changed styles, because before this point, up to this point in between 1994 and 1996, they had much more of a groove metal element to them. Now, not a lot of people have heard the songs This Pain and Protest. This Pain has kind of a metalcore-ish vibe to it, while Protest has more of a Pantera kind of groove metal-esque to it. Now, this is a very early interpretation of what Disturbed used to be, so it makes sense that they cleaned up their sound and made it a little bit more intense and a lot more angry and angsty, but they added a lot of humor to it as well, albeit dark and, I suppose, vulgar humor. So, like that band that swears so much that it's just kind of funny. That's kind of what I, envisioned Disturbed as when I first listened to them back in high school. I don't know, it's just something about them. The only songs I had heard really were Down with the Sickness, Stricken, and Liberate. Liberate being the first song I ever heard by the band. And of course, Liberate Your Mind, Your Motherfucker, You So Narrow Mind, It's nonsensical lyrics. They kind of make sense, but they're not necessarily that well written, but they're kind of funny, so it's kind of that whole vibe that really drew me into Disturbed in the first place. Now, that is pretty much all but gone ever since 10,000 Fists came to be in 2005, but they have definitely evolved as a band since then. But the band has, when they got David Draymond, definitely cleaned up and Disturbedified, I should say, their sound. So, starting with the release of The Sickness in 2000, they were pretty much classified as the top nu metal band in the history, or in that era, I should say, along with Linkin Park. So, the only difference is, this is a much heavier and much more well, I shouldn't say angsty, but it's definitely heavier and more intense than Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, their heaviest album. I wouldn't necessarily say that The Sickness is their heaviest album. It's definitely their second or third heaviest, but it's definitely got the intensity. It's their most intense and their most angsty album, I should say, that they have in their entire discography. Now, this pretty much has all of the stereotypical cliches that Disturbed would use in subsequent albums, such as the animal noises or nonsensical noises that David Draymond would just shout into the microphone just for the heck of it, really. Oh, wah, ah, ah, stuff like that. And, repetition of the lyrics because it sounds good and because it goes along with the rhythm of it, much like in the next album, Believe, they would repeat in the chorus of Liberate, You're So Narrow-Minded, So Narrow-Minded. They would just repeat the same thing, but it sounded really catchy and really good, and it just kind of drew the listener in a lot more because of it. So, what I mean by that, though, especially is, this is especially prevalent on the song Conflict, on the song Meaning of Life, too, with the Get Psycho, I Wanna Get Psycho. They repeat a lot of the same lyrics, so, a lot of the songs on here aren't necessarily well written, with the exception of maybe a few of them. The Game, Down with the Sickness, what's another one? Fear, Shout, of course, because it's a cover. They call it Shout 2000 on here, but I have it written down as Shout, just because, you know, 2000 just makes it sound kind of robotic, in my opinion, as a robotic title. But I'm going to be getting into a little bit of a track-by-track review to tell you guys what I think of each and every song. So, Voices and The Game. These two are probably one of the some of the most intense tracks on this album, and they definitely have some pretty decent lyrics, with the exception of maybe Voices, I suppose. I mean, they're okay, the lyrics are. It's kind of like when I said they repeat some of the same things over and over again. Let the living die, let the living die. And it is a well-written song in terms of conformity, in terms of cohesion, I should say. The lyrics go very well with the way the song is written, and it's kind of written around, the lyrics are written around the guitar parts and the structure of the song, which is really, really nice. So the next song is Stupefy, After the Game, which I will talk about. I don't know. This song has a little bit of a lighter edge to it, The Game does. It gets heavy once you get really into it, but then it kind of softens up and, you know, kind of opens up a little bit, whilst keeping that heavy edge, I suppose. That doesn't really make much sense. But I should say that the guitar parts in the chorus kind of wind down a little bit in the verse structure to kind of give this softer edge, while David Draymond sings a lot softer, and it definitely goes well with the structure of the song. The next song is Stupefy. This one, I really like the guitar parts, I really like the structure, I like how David Draymond sings it. The only thing I don't like are the lyrics. He rhymes fuck with fuck over and over again. I was listening to the song for the first time back in high school in my freshman year, and it was one of the first songs I heard by them. I liked it, but then I looked up the lyrics, and I was just kind of blown away by how stupid it was. Stupid it sounded. This is probably the worst written track on the album. Now, I do like the song. In fact, I love the song. Don't get me wrong. I love the song. Don't get me wrong. I just really, really, really don't like the lyrics. The next song is Down with the Sickness, and of course, this is probably the angriest and most intense song on the album. That's why it is known for being one of their best songs in their entire discography, practically. And it opens up really, really soft and kind of gives this impression of building up tension and angst and anger until it just explodes in the chorus. Now, the drum beat definitely gives off the vibe that something big is going to happen later on in the song when it opens up with it, and it just keeps building tension, and like I said, explodes in the chorus until the climax where he is screaming about 3/4 into the song. It's a very good song, probably one of my favorites on the album. I absolutely love it. My favorites are probably Voices, Down with the Sickness, Violence Fetish, Fear, Dropping Plates, and Meaning of Life. Those are my absolute bar none favorites. The next song, Violence Fetish, another really, really intense one, another heavy one. Not necessarily well written, but closer to the middle section of the song. David Draymond screams, "Tell me what I'm supposed to be," another goddamn drone, like a mind puppet and a slave to the government. That part I really do like. The rest of the song, where they're kind of repeating, "Bring the violence insignificant to the life, if I ever known anyone," it doesn't really make much sense in the context of the song, but when it gets past the midsection and, you know, after it kind of opens up a little bit, I do like the way the song is written. And I should say that the verses are very well written. I think it's just the chorus that kind of, isn't really well written, but it sounds very good together, much like on the rest of the album. So the next song's Fear. This is a slower song, but it isn't necessarily very soft. It's one of the heavier songs on the album. It's one of those that builds up tension, much like the drum beat in Down with the Sickness. It's one that begins very, very soft, or very light, I should say, but then just kind of explodes. This one explodes more so in the beginning, right after the kind of computer effects kind of die away, and then the guitar parts come in, and David Draymond starts singing or screaming or whatever you want to call it. That's when this song really picks up. But the beginning just serves to build tension. And that's what this album does. It builds a lot of tension, it's very angsty, and it's just nu metal at its finest. Probably, I would say necessarily not one of their best, but, you know, it is one of their best, but it's not the best. So, the next songs, Numb and Want, I'm just going to kind of go over them briefly. Want is better than Numb, but they're the two weak links on the album. They don't really fit. I think they probably could have replaced one of these songs, probably Numb, with God of the Mind, the B-side that they recorded, or A Welcome Burden. I don't really like A Welcome Burden as much, but I think it's better than Numb. Numb is probably one of my least favorite Disturbed songs, well, one of, on this album, let alone their discography. I don't know, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't build tension, it's not intense. It sounds like it could be from a different era of Disturbed, but it still sounds nu metal-ish, but it just doesn't really fit, and it's not really appealing to me, to my ears. So, the next song after Want, it picks up with Conflict. This one is very catchy, probably one of the catchiest songs on the album, and it repeats the same thing over and over again in the chorus. You are enemy, my very greatest enemy, a very bitter enemy, and it's a really good song. Not necessarily well written in terms of a subject, but it doesn't have to be about something in order to be well written, I suppose, so I don't know, I just really like how catchy this song is and how heavy it is. So, you know, especially with the, in the 3/4 mark, it has a part where everything just kind of screeches to a halt, and it's a really soft, really atmospheric part where, David Draymond comes in and starts singing very softly, and then, at the end of it, he just keeps saying enemy, enemy, and then he screams enemy, and then it just, everything just breaks down, and it's all over the place, as in intense. A new level of tension, I should say. And then the song ends after that, after a little bit. But it's a very good song. Shout, this is one of my favorite covers. Honestly, it takes the original version and turns it into a Disturbed song, which is what the covers, or all covers, should do. The band should take the cover and make it their own. They shouldn't try and, you know, maybe sing it in the vein of the original, because what's the point? You're just duplicating the original. That's where Anthrax failed with the Anthems cover album. Every song sounded as though it were meant to be the original recording. There's no point in that. Bring something new to the table, and Shout definitely does that. The next song, Droppin' Plates, one of my favorites on this album. Absolutely love it. Disturbed in the House with, or We're Droppin' Plates. It begins very nicely. It's nu metal at its finest. Probably one of the most intense songs on the album. Builds up tension, much like Fear and Down with the Sickness. One of the 3 songs that actually does this. And it retains that humor, that really vulgar humor that Disturbed is known for on their first 2 albums. The next song, Meaning of Life. This one isn't very well written. Power flowing, juicy flowing, red hot meaning of life. Lyrics like that are just kind of cringeworthy when you actually think about it. But when it comes down to it, this song is one of my favorites. This song is a very, very well structured song, I should say. It's very intense, it's heavy, and the repetition of the line "Get Psycho with me" or "Get Psycho, I want to get psycho" definitely brings out the intensity of the entire song, and it definitely kind of puts forth that energy of what they were supposed to, or what they were trying to get at with this song. So, overall, this is known for being one of their best albums. A lot of people think it is their best album, but like I said, I actually prefer a couple other albums, which I will get into a little bit later. But overall, I think I would give this album probably 9.5 out of 10. I will give it a 9.5 out of 10. I think that's fair. So, with that, thank you very much for watching. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Keep calm and rock on.